Welcome to the Level Up Career Playbook Podcast, or as I like to call it now, How to Be Better at Your Job. I am your host, Brian Bell, and I'm honored that you're here listening wherever you are today. This podcast is powered by Mamba HR. It's a tool that my co-founder, Kelly Inman, and myself, we've been slowly building in our spare time. And the point of Mamba HR is to build technology to have that HR business partner in your pocket, so all of you can be better at your jobs. The name Mamba in Mamba HR, that's inspired by Kobe Bryant's legendary Mamba Mentality. Kobe believed that to truly be great, you have to fall in love with the process, the daily grind, the constant improvement. It's the relentless pursuit of excellence, and it's about the journey, not the destination. And that's what we're all about at Mamba HR and on this podcast. Look, here's the deal. We all want to be better at what we do. We want to make more money. We want to have more impact. We want to be better. But most of the career advice that's supposed to help with that is either too vague or doesn't really seem to work in the real world, which is why we started this podcast. So every episode, we sit down with the real people, the professionals who have actually done it, people who have navigated the tough decisions, taken the risks, and come out stronger. They share their real stuff, their real failures, their victories, and the specific strategies that makes the difference. This isn't the generic work harder 24/7 advice. We're talking real things that you can use right now, or whether you're leading teams, switching careers, or just trying to stand out in your current role. Every guest that we have is somebody that can drop some knowledge that can help you actually level up your game. And today's guest is no different. She's been helping professionals and organizations transform, grow, and thrive over the last 25 years. She's seen it all from gaming giants like EA to tech innovators in Silicon Valley, and now guides Fortune 100 companies through their toughest challenges. In each of my podcasts I've done so far, I always mention how I had that one person that was the absolute most influential to my career, who really took me under their wing and put me on the path to being the HR business partner that I am today. And that is our current guest. I owe a lot to her. Sondra Norris, welcome to the show. How are you?
Hi, B. I'm good. I'm happy to be here. I love that we're doing this.
I'm super happy. This is amazing. This is a full circle moment. All right, let's get to the nitty gritty. We have 1 hour, and people are going to learn a lot from you because you actually help people be better at their careers. You help managers, you help companies. This is literally what you do. You know, all the things that I've gone through, I decided I really want to pick the brains of the best people and figure out how can I be better so I can make sure I'm in control of my destiny. And you are one of the people that is probably the best at helping other people be better. So in so many ways, I'm thankful. Let's start with the first question. Who the hell are you?
Okay, so hi, everybody. I'm Sondra Norris. I'm thrilled to be here with Brian. Over the moon. We've known each other for quite a few years, have been through a lot of life stages together. So who am I? I am a 30-year professional who kind of did what she was told, did all the expected steps, and was really lucky early in my career to have somebody who positioned how I think about my career in a very specific way. And that was the launch for me to develop and grow and shift my career through all of these years. Where I love to work is with the people. I love to see positive changes happening either at a systemic organizational leadership level that then trickle down to all the people who are depending on those leaders and systems and organizations for the quality of their lives. Gallup just did another poll, and it said 50% of the people in the world who are working, which is a huge number of people, like 4 billion, are unhappy, not just at work, they're unhappy in their life. And work is a huge percentage of our life. So companies have a massive opportunity to make an impact on humanity if they can make that part of life manageable, feel good, allow people to not be confused and lost and disillusioned and all those other things. There's a huge opportunity for business. Now, is business going to take that opportunity? Probably not. So that's why I'm super glad why we're here, so that we can reach as many people as possible and say, okay, if the company's not doing it, or the company's doing it, but it's not working for you, what do you have in your control to control your destiny to some degree? Life is, life gets a kick out of throwing us curveballs and kicking us in the shins. So, yeah.
Okay, if you're a listener, you are probably going to have the most impactful 1 hour of this entire podcast that we'll ever have just by that intro alone. I'm excited. I'm going to learn more from this. So incredible. Sondra, you're amazing. All right, let's get started.
Go.
So as you know, this is the the Mamba HR, the Level Up Playbook Podcast. This is sports theme related. Of course, I had to use the Kobe in I'll probably throw some Tom Brady in there. So we'll break this up into segments and they're sports related. So the first segment is called the pregame. So we're going to talk about your foundational years, the early influences, just how Sondra became the Sondra that we're talking to. Okay, so let's start from the very beginning. Take us back to college. Let's take us back to university. Think you went to Chico? Think you studied oral communication? How did that even happen? What got you there? Like, that's such a weird thing to start with, I would imagine. How did that even happen?
So my dad was a lawyer and he came from a really poor family and he's a boomer. And so he was like, all my kids must take the safe path. So you must go to college. Expectation for all of us. When you get to college, you may study, Sondra, one of two things, either computer science or business. And if you do that, then we'll pay for most of your college. So I said, no way am I going to do computer science. I'll try business. Business was so hard. I had been a fairly good student up to that point. Accounting 101, economics 101. I was getting hard C minuses in those classes because my brain, it didn't like going down that path. So when I was there was the first year of this major that I ended up having, which was actually organizational behavior. And it was founded by two guys who most recently had been characters at Disneyland with their last job, and then they became college professors. And I talked my dad into that this was business without the math. And somehow he said, okay, whatever. And I think I was just that kid where my dad said, okay, whatever, a lot. But I ended up in that curriculum, which was very few classes. I took most of the classes actually in the summer period and the winter period when they were 2 weeks long. And usually we would get a week or 7 days into the curriculum and the teachers would be like, okay, we want to go on vacation, so you're good enough, go ahead. Now, I did take one serious class in that major, and I can't remember what it was called. I think it may have even been called training and development or adult learning or something like that. And the professor's first name was Mark. I've been racking my brain. I can't remember his last name. And that was the class I took that said, I was thinking I wanted to be a teacher. And that class said, you can go be a teacher in a company, which means you can make more money. Because there I learned that companies are training their people. And they're training people through, at that point, because this was 1989, was through employee assistance programs. They had career centers and things like that. So there was an opportunity there. And so I kind of said, okay, if I am a teacher, I'm probably not going to make a lot of money. I'm not positive that I want to spend my whole day with kids. So I'm going to go this way. And that was kind of the first thing that I learned a model that was Mager and Pipe, which is still a very classic and relied upon model that says, when you see performance problems, your first step in diagnosing the cause should be, is it a systemic problem or is it a skill problem? Because that's going to send you in two completely different directions in how you solve the problem. So I always remembered that and kind of leaned on that a lot throughout my career. But that's how it happened.
Is it systemic or skill? I always use is it skill versus will? Is that
two different things?
That's not the same thing.
No, so skill and will, you're still talking about the people. But systemic versus skill means you're talking about the organization. It doesn't have the processes. And that's why the performance isn't there.
So that's where I should be starting. I've learned something in the first 5 minutes of this already. So that's incredible. We'll probably dig there, but I wanted to go back a little bit to see if there's some learning lessons from your dad. Your dad said you will either do computer science or you're going to do business. What was he trying to solve for? And the reason why I asked this question for listeners, if you have kids or if you're going to college yourself, maybe that was 35, 40 years ago. I wonder if there's still some similarities now, computer science or business. What was he trying to solve for? And if you're thinking about going back to school now, even if you're in your 30s, what was he solving for? And how should you think about your education?
Well, so for my dad and anyone who's a boomer, right, the generational experience that boomers had, whether it was because in my mother's case, she escaped communist China, whether it was, my dad's case, because he grew up so poor and lived through and fought in world wars, it was safety. Pick the thing that has the best odds of having you financially secure for the most time. So he even said, pick a big company that has a pension plan. Like no companies have pension plans
That doesn't
anymore.
exist anymore.
And it was
It's the
basically
equivalent is RSUs, I guess, now to companies that have equity, I guess.
exactly. And it was, that generation was nose to the grindstone. You do what you got to do to create safety for yourself and eventually maybe for your family, but ignore how you feel. You do what you got to do to get it done. So that was his. Now, and when I'm thinking about myself or for my kids who are now grown, but for other people who have younger kids, the schools are still aptitude testing for job titles, right? Like it was the same as it was when I was in school. You should be an accountant. You should be a lawyer. You should be a pipe fitter, whatever. Rather, it's help your kids identify the type of tasks and experiences they want to be involved in with work. What makes them happy? Does it make them happy to finish things quickly? Or does it make them happy to like really work on something for a long time, little by little, and have a great sense of accomplishment? Do they like being around people? Do they not like being around people? Do they like math and problem solving? Or do they like, big picture, imaginary thinking? And then find the jobs that lend themselves to those things. But all of these characteristics.
That's $1 million business idea, Sondra. Remember that one. We'll write that down. You're on. Sorry to interrupt. Keep going.
It's good. But those skills can apply to a million different jobs. So there's aspects of every job that involve lots of different skills. And so resist the impulse to say, well, my school career counselor told me I should find this kind of job. And so I'm going to go get that kind of job. It's a different way of thinking about it.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's another jewel there.
Great.
You mentioned that it was one class that the light bulb went off for you. What happened in that class, or was there a specific moment, or is there a bunch of moments? But what was it that really got you into, what? I want to go down to people and organizational work.
Yeah.
Obviously, the start was go do business work, but the specific track.
So when I was a senior in high school, I took my first psychology class. And when I was a junior in high school, I went from being a straight A student to a straight C and D student because I was losing interest, right? My senior year, I take this psychology class and I am just lit up. Like, this is so fascinating to me, how people work, why people do the things they do, how our brains work, all this stuff. And I always had it in the back of my mind, I want to do psychology. I floated this to my dad, and my dad was like, no way, that's psychobabble, bullshit. You'll never get a job with that kind of degree. And my older brother, reinforced my dad's opinion. And I always kept that interest in my mind. And I think when I was a sophomore, I was like, Dad, it's just too hard. It's too hard. I found this other thing. And I also want to do psychology. And again, he said, nope, not spending my money on that. If you want to do it, pursue it yourself, spend your own money on it. And so I was doing double major of psychology and organizational behavior. And when I got to that class was when I saw the convergence of my interest in people and a career that would take my interest in people, but in a potentially financially survivable or better way. Previously, I hadn't seen any of that. I didn't have HR classes or anything like that. So I hadn't seen kind of that opportunity until I got into that class where I saw use your understanding of people to help the business stay alive and perform. I think that was kind of the light bulb that went off.
I love that. Now, on the last part, love for you to, especially for the listeners, if you're not in HR, I think we try to prove our existence, a lot of us in HR, but the work that you've been doing, which it folds under the human resources banner, there's some psychology there, there's business. Why does this work actually matter? Why does having classes for it matter? Why does it have HR business partners? And how does this actually help businesses thrive? And the reason why I want to know that is, if you're not in HR, why does HR matter for me? Why does what you're doing matter then?
That's a really big question.
So answer it simply, okay?
Yeah. So I coach HR people who are HR teams of one in small companies. And I was talking to one of my clients a couple of weeks ago, and she's asking me questions like, how do I get my seat at the table? I'm starting to think about 2025. How do I show up at that leadership table like a leader, not like somebody who just, is here to implement performance management stuff? And I said, keep in mind that what your job is to understand the changing commitment level of all employees and to have in your encyclopedic knowledge what it takes to gain the commitment and trust of the people who are doing the work. That's your first thing. Your second thing is then to start implementing stuff that is going to help rebuild and regain or maintain and build all employees' trust and commitment in their management, their leadership, and their company. And so all the tools that you have at your disposal, performance management, compensation, benefits, training, manager enablement, process management, all those tools that you have from your seat, all you care about is how am I maximizing the commitment of the employees so that the company will perform. And that's going to then open the doors to have conversations with managers, with leaders, etc. So how does it help the person who's not in HR? HR is there, theoretically, although I would argue that it has devolved over the decades that HR has been around and become devalued and minimized. But that's what HR is there for, is to help your human experience at the organization be better. So if you're fortunate to work at a company that has a great HR organization, it's kind of the conscience of the organization. How are we treating people? How are we building trust, not violating it? And what are all the things that go into that equation? It's a complicated equation, but it doesn't have to be if you have a strong philosophical kind of, here's my approach, here's my mindset.
Getting that buy-in from every single one of your employees to make sure they're showing up doing their best job, which on its face is like, well, doesn't everybody show up and do their best job? No, they're there for a paycheck. So can you get them to that next level? I get what you're saying there.
Well, one of the errors and how do we get people motivated? How do we get people's buy-in? Like, you're not going for buy-in. You're going for commitment. A human being doesn't commit to a company or a strategy. They say that's what they're doing, but what they're actually doing, because they're human, is they are then a part of the human symphony that's going on inside of the organization. And so your approach has to be more human. And your knowledge of the human operating system should be HR's superpower, right?
Tell me why it's devolved then, because the way you make it sound, yes, this is the job that I try to do every single day. Mm-hmm. This is some of the best HR people. That's what they do. How did it evolve? Normally when I show up to a new company, it's we still have to rebuild our trust as an HR team, or we report into the IT world or to finance, and HR needs to stay over in the corner. What happened? How did we devolve into maybe we're making a comeback? I'm not sure yet, but how did it go backwards?
Well, every company is most concerned about its revenue and its margin. And when you force a human-based organization to try to say, what's your P&L for the quarter, for lack of a better term, it gets focused on the wrong things. It gets focused on the performance management system and how many people completed it versus how many completed it well. And then you throw out the system because people aren't using the system well. So it wasn't a system issue. It's a people issue. The system doesn't matter. It can be on index cards. But you have to have people understanding what's the purpose of that. Then you have organizations, like SHRM, that just got roasted in the last 6 months, right? For certifications and approaches being really, really antiquated. That all HR is about is benefits and compensation and all those kind of traditional process-oriented things. And it became very transactional, right? It's like people are a piece of paper being pushed from one place to the other. They're not being looked at as the humans that they are. So a lot of companies will say, well, that's managers' jobs. But managers are people too. And if you're going to ask managers to do something different than they've ever done before on the job, you have the same exact problem as you have when you look at an employee and say, I need you to do something different on the job. But we sort of magically expect, oh, well, if you're a leader or you're a manager, then you're somehow more evolved as a human and more emotionally regulated than any other human walking around. And, we all know we shouldn't eat hamburgers and milkshakes every day. We know that, but we still choose to do it.
Yeah. Okay. I'm sorry, I detoured us quite a bit.
That's cool.
I'll get us on track. But that was super helpful. People that are listening, HR matters. HR people, it's our job to make sure people understand why we do what we're doing. So that's very good.
That's right.
Good call. Let's go back. So school's done, and now your career's evolving. You were doing training. Now you've evolved into advising Fortune 100 companies. You were head of people at some places. What sparked your evolution over all these different places that you worked at and kind of where you ended up now? How did you know it was time to evolve? Why did you evolve? Walk me through that.
So it goes back to Mager and Pipe. And it goes back to when you're trying to solve performance problems within an organization, meaning how is the business performing, not how are people performing. When you're trying to solve business performance problems, you have systemic issues and you have people issues. And I kept running into the managers or leaders who would say, hey, I have a manager who's broken. Can you coach him and fix him? Like, no, I can't. And I kept hearing that. And I kept noticing that as I'm doing manager training at Electronic Arts, in fantastic training rooms with fantastic food and all of this stuff, what I kept hearing was, this is all really great stuff, but I can't implement it here. The systems and processes are getting in my way. The part of my job that is making me be an individual contributor responsible for measurable business things is getting in my way. And so what I learned over time is that teaching isn't enough. If you really want people to succeed, you have to look at the organizational effectiveness as a whole. And so that got me thinking about, okay, well, the place where I can impact that is in HR leadership, instead of just being in L&D, responsible for just producing a learning experience. But actually, in one case, I rolled out a program that was so well received and accepted, but then I got told by my boss, stop doing that because it's exposing the weaknesses of our system. And people are quitting because they're not seeing how their future is going to ever get any better here. But the program itself was like, ooh, enlightening, and people's minds were blown and everything else. So I wanted to have increasing levels of influence over a larger system. So that was kind of how I then started thinking about my career and where I wanted to have impact. I went from a big company to a small company, so that I could learn it better and have more span of control.
From your perspective, for somebody listening, when do you know it's time for somebody listening? How would they know it's time for them to evolve in their career? You said, I'm not making impact, or I want to make a different level of impact. What are the signs? What are the signals for someone to be like, you know what, maybe I should change the way I thought my career was going to go a little bit?
So, one of the great models for people to look up is called the 4 stages of contribution. I don't like the way it's named, so I call it the 4 types of contribution. But when you take a job, you're striving to be a high performer, because when you're a high performer, you get rewarded. You get rewarded with more responsibility, more money, whatever. And the first thing is that you have to have your own rubric in your mind of why you're taking a job. What am I here to learn? What skills am I applying that I know I'm good at? What skills do I need to think about for my next possible opportunity? And how am I going to pull those into this opportunity? And so every day goes by and everything happens, and we're not the same person the minute that thing happens. The minute we learn something, we're not the same person. The minute a day goes by, we're not the same person we were yesterday. And so we have to have our own compass there. So I think the signs are, if you have done that examination, you can say, I feel like I have learned this thing. I feel like I have been expert at this thing. Now, since we're a sports themed thing, baseball, there's 3 key skills to have in baseball. You have to hit, you have to catch, you have to throw. You can do all those things. Shouldn't you be great? No, because on the baseball field, there are 11,327,448 different situations that can happen. And you don't learn what?
I see what you did there. I like that.
You don't learn how to actually apply those skills, to all those situations overnight, obviously. And so having a mentor who has walked the walk, has been there, done that, who can say, I think you're saying you're more senior than you are at this point, because you haven't experienced enough situations. So I think knowing what you're coming in with, what you want to get, and where you are, those are really important, hard, honest conversations to have with yourself, and to really think about, okay, if you're thinking about moving, why? Like, what's the next thing? Are you running away from something? Are you running towards something? Is it really something attainable that will be what you thought it was to the best degree possible? None of us can know what's going to happen tomorrow.
Okay. You, in your career, you've been doing consulting, even at the regular jobs. I think you've always been a consultant of some type, especially around career development. So what would you say is the most surprising thing or aspect you've learned about career development over all this time that people get wrong? There's all these different philosophies about career development. What's something that's very surprising that, no, that's actually not right. I wouldn't follow that advice or that philosophy.
That you have to go up and to the right, that you have to climb a ladder, and that's what success is, that a promotion is definitely the best thing for you. I think that's probably a concept that we buy into too much. I think the other thing that we make a mistake on as employees is that any company or any manager has their shit together enough to actually have an individual's best interests and their future in mind. Like, they don't. It's complicated. They don't have that in mind. And when we assume we're going in to work for a manager and the manager is going to say, oh, I'm so glad you're here, Brian. Let's talk about you and your career development and what you care about. And let me be your partner and guide and help you navigate this organization. Like, that doesn't exist. It just doesn't exist. It's weird if it does exist. You're lucky if it exists. And you should never leave a manager who actually helps you do that. Unless, of course, the opportunities are run out at that particular company. But that's what I would say.
Yeah, good call. You were my manager for a while, and I just assumed that everybody is amazing. But I have learned over the past 15 years now.
Yeah.
You left me in the cold, Sondra. It's not that way. You were right, and it felt normal. Like, every manager should be looking out for the people, but they're looking out for themselves, and they have pressures like anybody else. And so having an amazing manager, you're right, stick with them.
And it's not because they're evil, bad people. The percentage of people in the world that are actually evil, bad people who are looking to hurt other humans is very, very small. We're all just operating from our screwed up systems and trying to protect ourselves first, right? And so that's just the way it is.
It sounds like you've been working with executives and teams across the globe almost since you graduated from college.
Very lucky.
So looking back throughout this entire career so far, what do you think the biggest obstacle that is holding people back from really reaching their potential? What's the thing that, you look back 10 years, you're like, you really could have been here, but you didn't. What happened? Why are people held back?
It's themselves. And it's systemic. Like, we are the way we are because of the system and the way that it teaches us and the way that we have expectations. Nobody teaches us, okay, you're transitioning from being in your parents' house to being in school. So how should you think about this experience? Like, your parents try and teach you, right? But that's inconsistent. And then when people try, I don't even know. I don't think it exists, right? Like, you don't get taught really, here's what's going to happen when you go from college, where you have grades, you have expectations, you have assignments. This is how you get an A. This is how you get a B. All of a sudden you go to work and there are no rules. There just aren't. Your job description, your job ends up never being what the job is that you're actually doing. Nobody can give you really great feedback on how you're doing. And so you just kind of go along with the system. So I think it's that none of us have enough of a perspective, an approach, a mindset about, this is my career and this is my life. And as we get older, we do things like get a significant other. We do things like buy a house, buy a car, have children, have pets. We increasingly make our life more and more complicated and complex. And we're not prepared for the toll that takes.
A question around that. I've worked with some people. There's always one or two people at every place that I've been at that don't seem to have as much experience as I do, but they seem to somehow know how to navigate what you're talking about better, all the complexities of the jobs that we have. And they just show up well, they speak well. But if you looked at their experience and their resume, it's like, you've never done this. But somehow they do show up as if they were given all that guidance of how to make that transition. They were given the guidance of, this is how you show up at a corporate America job. This is how you do your job. But it sounded like most of us didn't get that. The people that are doing it well, doing their jobs well, navigating the politics, are they getting that experience? Are they getting that teaching that most of us don't get? Or how are people showing up so well compared to, I think, the large majority of us that are just winging and hoping you're getting it right?
Who is your podcast guest that you talked about critical thinking with?
Meredith. I work with
Meredith.
her at Attentive.
Yeah. Meredith made the point of making it a point to answer the question, why? So the London School of Economics, their motto is a Latin phrase that I won't repeat because I can't, but it means to know the causes of things. And so this is about critical thinking. And I think one of the big things that those people have is the ability to critically think, meaning they can say something as simple as, what do I need to do in order to get to this goal? They can break it down. They can put it into steps. That's an element of critical thinking. Another element of critical thinking with relation to this is they have thought about, if I want to be successful in this job, what information do I need? And how do I then do the things that I just found out about? I think that certain people have just better discipline than other people. And so I'll go back to Kobe Bryant, which is they have learned along the way somehow to understand the process, to see the process, and to love the process. And to know that these micro steps are going to be the things that add up to something better. I think for every person that you saw, they had a different way of learning that or figuring that out. And I don't think there's any organized way of teaching somebody that, because you have to experience it. You have to experience the results of the process yourself to be able to start appreciating that kind of lifestyle, that kind of approach to the way you live your life. Which also, by the way, isn't to say that inside they're not just as screwed up as the rest of us, even though on the outside they look like they're doing everything right.
Yeah. But that is a very good point. And shout out to Meredith again. It's the people that are doing their best work. It sounds like they are asking why and understanding the why at every single juncture and every single part of everything that they do every single day. They lead with the why, they start with the why, and not just on autopilot and just doing work that somebody tells it. They always start with the why, and then everything else falls from there. So if you're listening, even something very small, figure out the why, figure out why the company wants you to do it, figure out why you're doing it, figure out why the company is selling what they're selling. That's a very good point. And everything else that comes from that is going to be a lot more positive.
And that sets you up. I mean, it's an element of accountability, right? That I'm responsible only for myself, and gosh, I better be responsible for myself. But if I'm counting on other people to tell me what to do, to tell me how I feel, to, reward me in the way I need to be rewarded, that's a hard thing to keep doing your whole entire life, especially as it gets more complex. So where is my accountability? Where is somebody else's? Yeah.
Okay. I love it. All right, let's move on to the second segment. It's called the Power Up. We've talked about quite a bit. So at this point, I don't even know if the segments are helpful, but let's talk a little bit more about building up your career resilience and also how you build up those high-performing, highly resilient teams.
Yeah.
One of the things you've mentioned a lot is, and we kind of talked this already, a lot of people, they do not receive guidance on how to view their career. You mentioned that one of the issues that people have is they think it's always up and to the right. That's how careers are. One step deeper, what is a misconception and how should people actually view career development? Not just like progression, but actually developing themselves. What's something that we're getting wrong, and what's something that we should do to think about how we actually develop?
So when you enter a company, because it's a construct, it's an organization, it has rules and roles and job families and all of this stuff. It's set up naturally to kind of force you into that ladder of, oh, well, if I'm a junior marketing associate, next it's I'd be a marketing associate, then I'd be a senior marketing associate. You just sort of accept that that's the path that you should be on. And so I think that really, this goes back to the people who have a strong orientation to understanding why. When you know that, for example, a lot of people will join HR because they really love to help people. That's like the phrase you hear, I'm a people person. And it's like, it's a cliche. People. Yes, it's and so if you're in HR and you're watching this, or if you're not in HR, you can just take this and translate it to whatever you want, whatever fits for you. Is what do you mean? What do you mean you want to help people? You want to help people have a better job experience, a better experience at the events they attend. You want people to understand how to navigate their lives better. You want them to have all the information available for them to make the best benefits decisions for themselves and their family. What is it that you want to, what do you mean help people? Like, it's such a huge topic. So bring those things down to a fine point, because then what you're able to do is say, here's the skill set I have. And so if I'm in marketing, I could then look at 3 other job families. I could look at business development. I could look at sales. I could look at, probably not engineering because you need more technical training for that, but you could look at customer success. You could look at professional services, and the skills are very transferable to be moving along and getting to do things every day. Some are going to be hard and challenging. Some of them are going to, just suck, because there's just parts of everybody's jobs that suck. But if most of the day you're doing something that you decided you wanted to do in the way that you wanted to do it, you're going to have more long-term career satisfaction than if you just follow somebody else's dictated ways.
Yep. And then you also get in trouble of, they weren't innovative enough. They weren't helping to bring us along the journey. You just kind of a follower. And a lot of times with performance reviews, it's the people that thrive are, they really thought outside the box. They took this thing that we've been doing forever and they questioned why, and they built it and grew it better. And you're looking like, well, nobody ever told me to think that way. I would have if you would have told me. And they're never going to really tell you to do that. Yeah.
Which is another, learn how to advocate for yourself, learn how to speak the company's language, learn how to, when you go talk to your manager, make it easy for your manager to say yes to whatever it is you're asking. So
what
when
does that
I was
mean?
a manager, okay. So when I was a manager for a lot of years, I had a handful of employees who would come to me and who would say, tell me what my next thing should be. And I would say, well, what are you interested in? Well, anything. Okay. This is very hard. I appreciate that you're open, that you want to go do things, but I cannot be responsible for the architecture of somebody's day-to-day experience and their career. That's your responsibility to tell me, here's what I like, here's what I don't like, here's what I'm committed to, here's where I want to get to. And by the way, I found this project that this other department's working on, and I'd really love to go do that so I can build my skills. Awesome. Yes, please go do that. So much easier for that. Now, people who do that get more of their manager's attention and time, because everybody's competing for your manager's time and attention. Manager doesn't have enough time. There is no manager on the planet that has enough time to individually, one-on-one coach every aspect of their employee's life. So make it easy for your manager to say, yes, I've already thought about how this is going to affect my current responsibilities. Here's the contingencies I've made for that. Here's why I want to learn this. The more that your manager knows about you, the better they are able to help you. You know the story when I was working as an administrative assistant and I almost got fired. And because I almost got fired, my manager said, what is it you even want to do? And I said, oh, well, I want to be in learning and development. Well, why didn't you tell me that? I could have helped you. And that was that first manager I had that then set me on this hole.
Yeah, but then you would think that I don't want to do my job and I need to pay my bills, right? And so I can't afford to have you think that I don't want to do this job. So it's the more you're able to tell your manager who you are and build that relationship of trust, then you can actually drop that. People that are listening, do not walk into your manager's office. Well, nobody has office anymore. Do not get on that Zoom call and be like, manager, I want to go and be completely opposite of whatever role you're in. Do not do that. Please don't do that. I think I could do that with you, Sondra, because we built up a relationship and actually you made it that way. You built an open door that we had that relationship. But for most people, you don't. Do not go and tell somebody you want to do something exactly opposite until you've built that trust up. Please, please, please do not fall down that trap. And it happens way too often.
It does. And here's what you can do. So if you know you want to go be doing something X degrees different from whatever the current job is that you're in, identify what it's going to take for you to get there. Do you need to learn how to do Excel? Do you need to learn how to be a project manager? Do you need to learn whatever presentation skills, whatever it is? and ask for those opportunities.
Yeah.
Look for those opportunities to start building your skill. You can still keep yourself safe. It's still going to help the current role that you're in, and it will help move you forward. So that's something that you can do in order to still get yourself prepared without revealing, hey, I want to go be hairdresser to the stars within 2 years.
And I will say this, if you'd have asked this a year ago, prior to really ChatGPT taking off, I would say you got to go find a mentor, go Google, go ask people that are in the industry that you're interested in, maybe outside of your company. There's ways to do that, and people are still waiting for it to be handed to them. Now, you can go to ChatGPT, pull in your resume, pull in the job description of the job you want, and say, what are my gaps and what do I need to do there? And you can actually get a map. So there's literally no excuse now to figure out what are the gaps and what do you need to do to get to the next step. There's no excuse. You can do it for free. And you can do it in about 20 seconds, literally.
Yeah, 100%.
All right, let's talk more about the teams and managers building up the team's performance. You've said this before. I've heard it when you were my leader. And I think you've said this on LinkedIn and quite other places. High-performing teams are like rainbows. They appear when conditions are right. You said that. You don't remember this, but you said it. What are those conditions? How can leaders create those conditions?
Okay, so it's going to sound maybe like I'm banging on a drum. So I will, I'll say it this way. First of all, people don't commit to companies, they commit to people. So you have to find a way to build a personal bridge with your people. Now, that doesn't mean that you're talking about personal information all the time, but how do you determine that you trust somebody? Because they did what they said they were going to do, because they protect what they said they were going to protect, because they don't violate what they said was important to them. If it is all in their control, oftentimes you still have to violate something, but it's not within your control. When I had to do a layoff, it completely violated my principles of how I believe human beings should be treated. And therefore, I ended up leaving working inside because I didn't ever want to put myself at risk of having to do that again. Rather, I would prefer to advise companies on how to not have to do that ever again. So the first thing is establishing that commitment. Now, I stumbled into this in my second job. I was a production supervisor in a factory. I had no idea what the fuck I was doing. And I was responsible for reforming the teams in response to a complete factory overhaul that we were going to do. And I walked into a factory of 120 people. Some of them were outright mean people. And, most of them were earnest people who were working hard for a living. And I just started getting to know them. You're Kathy. You have 5 kids. You're 6 months pregnant with your 6th kid. You're Javier. You're Victor. We went to the same high school. Oh, you went to a different high school. Do you know this person? Like, have these conversations with people so that you know a little bit about who they are as human beings. Making eye contact with people and being willing to also share of yourself, because you're distanced as a manager from that team. So don't shy away from those conversations, and don't think that they're a waste of time, because they are building the fabric of the connection that your people can have.
Can I interrupt you real quick?
Yep.
I want to interrupt you on that part. I'm a manager. I know I need to be building my relationships and learning my teams, but there's 17 different tasks that I need to be talking about and updates that I need to get from you in our one-to-one agenda, and I only have 30 minutes of time today. If I'm a manager, should I be building that into my one-to-one agenda? How do I practically get to know people when I don't have the time to do so?
Yeah. So expand your timeline. You don't have to get to know everybody in a week. You don't have to get to know everybody in 6 months, but you have to provide opportunities to do that over time. So this is another kind of problem that I see with just the current workforce, is that people don't give enough time for things to play out. You don't build trust overnight. It takes time, but you have so many opportunities as a manager to keep proving that you are who you say you are. So show up for your one-on-ones, book a monthly 45-minute session where people just get to shoot the shit, let their hair down. And if they don't show up for the first 3, keep holding them. Because the assumption is, well, yeah, they were just trying to play the card that acts like they care, but then they quit. So see, they didn't care actually. Keep holding them, show your commitment to it. Let it happen little by little over time. Did that answer your question?
Yes. That
Okay.
was super helpful. Sorry, did I cut you off? I don't know where I cut you off.
No,
I'm
no,
sorry.
yeah. So, I mean, look, I keep banging the drum about commitment. That's obviously important, but work-related stuff. So when people are at work, they only have so much energy, right? And you'd like to think people are coming with a full bucket of energy, but the reality is people are showing up at work already with 50% of their overall energy available to them. And if they have to use any of that energy trying to figure out what is going on, why we're doing something, what is my job, what is my task, you're losing more energy from them. This is why context and goal setting and checking in on progress are so important, because people need the container in which they're working. And if they can more readily understand why something is happening because they have the history, then they can not have to fight with themselves trying to say, wait, what were we doing again? What was the last meeting that we had? I don't remember. And now you've lost them and they're struggling to figure that out. They're not on the same page with you. Similarly, if they can't predict with some reliability what's going to happen, nobody wants to be led down a dark alley filled with rats and sewage. I'm sorry, I don't. And so I need to know, where are we going? It doesn't have to be a 5-year detailed plan, but at least for the next 30 days, I need to know, where are we going? Why are we doing this? Help me have that information. Now, as managers, a lot of times we think about this stuff a lot. And so we show up in the team meeting, we're like, okay, next is this, blah, 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 blah. And people are like, they're on the inner tube behind the speedboat and they're pitched off the inner tube because you haven't taken the time to put one slide up that says, here's where we were last month. Let's talk about where we are going next month. And they're like, oh, but I can't have one more slide. Like, it has to be limited to 3 slides. I'm like, really? You want to limit it to 3 slides so you lose 20 people's attention? Like, put in the extra slide so that people have context of why things are happening.
That is so huge. And the reason why, I know what you're saying is true for a lot of reasons, but one of the main reasons is I've led people and people will beg for that context. People will beg to tell me, where are we going? Can we have a session where we figure it out together? Can you give me a map? Can you give me a roadmap? And that's one of the things I always start with. I always start with the roadmap, even if I'm an IC or a manager. And if I'm a manager, I'm building a roadmap with the team. Even though I know exactly where we're going to go, probably, people beg for it. And it's still crazy that people as managers, if you're a manager, if you're not doing this and providing that context of where you are and where you're going, everything else falls apart. So
yeah,
really good. Yeah. Good call.
So I would say those are the basic ingredients, right? Like, work towards commitment and trust on a person-to-person level, provide context, provide predictability, and keep doing it because people forget. Repeat, repeat,
Consistency.
Repeat. Yeah.
Who would ever thought? Consistency matters. All right, let's move on to the next segment called the playbook. Let's talk about strategies for being successful as a leader, successful in building your team. And in the interest of time, I might skip through some of these, but let's see if we can help our leaders out a little bit better on building their teams. What's the secret? There's a billion things, but what's the secret to turning a struggling team into a high-performing one? Can you share maybe a specific example that you've consulted on or done yourself of turning that team around? And what's the secret that people seem to skip?
They don't understand the source of why the team is struggling or poorly performing or has conflict. So in the 7 years that I was actively assessing cultural engagement and understanding the reasons why, trust for a lot of these companies initially got broken, sometimes as little as 2 years ago, and sometimes as much as 12 years ago. Some event that happened that leaders say, oh, that's ancient history. I wasn't even here when that happened. Why am I being held accountable for that? Understanding that a group of people has this shared knowledge of an event and what it meant that leadership was, or the company was, who they are. The minute you start not trusting another person, you start a little tally sheet in your head. And you look for, see, I knew I couldn't trust them. And even stuff that's innocent, you will start putting in that column of, see, I knew I couldn't trust them. So I think one of the biggest mistakes leaders make is that they don't accurately assess when trust started getting broken and the amount of ground that they have to make up for, even if it wasn't on their watch. The second thing is, I think, and it's interesting to watch individual contributors who become managers who hated what managers did, but then become the exact same way as soon as they're managers. And they say,
It happens more times than which is...
Yeah. Well, look, you joined a group. And so you have to stand with the group to stay safe in that group. You have to start singing out of the same hymn book as them. But the other thing that is just a mindset thing is when people start to say, and I start to hear the word entitled. When I hear leaders and managers say that the people are entitled, the people are a product of the environment that they're in. They are not entitled. They are an implicit contract when we join a company. And the implicit contract is, I'm going to give you my blood, sweat, tears, work, and everything, and you're going to take care of me. And the minute that take care of me starts getting fractured, then I'm going to start showing up different. And that's when managers and companies start to say, don't you want to keep this job? Aren't you grateful for the money that we give you and the benefits that we give you? Like, yeah, bare minimum, bro. Like, that's just part of the basics, but the other part is this human nature part. So I think being aware of the human operating system, again, as an individual and as groups, and the effect that your action and your inaction has on a team's commitment or willingness to work together. Understanding the genesis of the breaking of trust, understanding how that team is concluding whether or not they actually trust you as the leader. And then once you have that information, then you can start working on, let's try to make them into a high-performing team. But then I'll go back and reference time. You've got to give it time. You're not going to suddenly turn it into the dream team, the miracle
From
team.
your experience, is low-performing teams, generally it is because of broken trust? Is that
it could be a lot of that. Yes, I would say it's almost definitely going to be an ingredient somewhere in there. But I would also say that a low performing team can be the result of being in the middle of two other teams that aren't working. Whatever's coming to them downstream to them is screwed up that they have to fix. And then they don't give enough stuff to the people who are downstream from them. Those systemic problems can be affecting a team. Lots of different things. So spending the time diagnosing and understanding the why the team is performing poorly is super important, because otherwise you're just going to throw things after each other. Good money after bad money. A lot of management will say, it's just time to get some new blood in here with some new energy. Probably not a good idea. Yeah.
Last thing here on that question, if you could give me the top 5 ingredients of a high performing team, what are they?
What do you need to do to get one?
What a high-performing team has these 5 elements. What are the top 5 elements of a team that's already performing high?
Okay. A high-performing team has people who have checked all the boxes on self-determination theory. Self-determination theory is a theory of motivation that says, I have autonomy over enough in my job that I am not dependent on someone else to tell me what to do or how to do it. So I have a high level of autonomy. I have a high level of competence, meaning I'm confident in my ability to do the job that I need to do. I don't feel insecure or unable to deliver the parts of my job that are necessary. And the third leg is relatedness, meaning I have a sense of belonging with these people. And it is not, we're all striving for a common goal. That is not enough. It is not enough that we're all trying to get $8 million of ARR this year. The relatedness has to do with, do I feel like a safe and protected member of this group of human beings? And that only happens by people having conversation, by people having interactions, by people breaking down the walls to know that you and I look really different on the surface, but on the insides, we have way more in common. And that's global, it's domestic, it's everywhere.
Very good call. I think it's
within those 3 things, then there's implications for how do you get all of those 3 things, right?
I know that people, all my jobs, it's psychological safety. And when people hear that, especially now in the new world of, that sounds like a woke term that people get scared of. But if people are not really being able to feel safe that we're both on the same page and going the right way, you can call whatever you want to. But at the end of the day, you're right. You have to have that safety built in. And then you can only do that with time in actually doing the work.
Yeah. And look, what that has turned into is a manager asking for input. Okay, that is not psychological safety just because you ask the question.
Right.
right? Safety, psychological safety means that you see me as a human being and you do not minimize me, you do not marginalize me, you do not diminish me in any way. You never have to agree with me, but you see my inherent value as a human being. And that is all that there should be. Now that starts getting eroded by even the smallest of things, right? You called on one person, but not another. You said hello to one, but not another. Whatever it is, people have these very human reactions. Managers want to say, well, you should know I would never do that. People want to say that to each other. You should know I'm not a bad person. You know, I didn't mean for that to happen. And that's why we put managers in all of these communication skills classes to help them learn how to be an active listener, how to have eye contact, how to do performance reviews and all those things. But what they fail to understand is the system that they're actually impacting. Whether or not they will ever use those skills is debatable, but they never understand, for the most part, in these management development, leadership development programs, the impact of their choice to behave or not behave in certain ways.
Yeah. When I was at Snowflake, the CHRO, Shelly Began, she came in and she had everybody do, it's called the AVA, Activity Vector Analysis. It's like, how do you show up naturally and how do you show up when you do your job? And do those things match, right? And there's all kinds of different assessments that do this, but the AVA was great. I took mine, and this was after working 3 months where I was working for the greatest, dopest team ever, and then the board came in and wiped out the entire leadership team. So I had a new manager who said she didn't even believe in HR business partners. So I take this assessment. She said, you are fucked. She literally said to me, you are fucked. You are turning yourself inside and out trying to do this job. Because I was just trying to fit in. She wasn't a very highly personable person, so she would come in, not talk to me. She wouldn't say hi, and I'm like, oh my God, I did something wrong. And what I want to say to you is a lot of times we're going to have managers that don't ask the questions, or they might not call on you every single time, or they don't say good morning when they walk into you, but they might seem like they're giving all their attention to this one person. And you start thinking of taking it personal. One thing I would highly recommend for a lot of people is that manager did probably one of the biggest things ever for me. And she paid for what is basically a therapist. And it's like a therapist on steroids, Shelly Lefko, where she picked out those beliefs. So when a manager comes in and doesn't say hi to me, I'm not losing my mind because the manager has nothing to do with me. And I was able to show up, just do my job. And if I get let go, I get let go. If they're not talking to me, they don't talk to me. But I was able to focus on doing my job and not worried about all these little small signals, because the truth is you're probably not going to have a good manager. You're probably not going to have, maybe it's a good one, but you won't have a great one that won't do all these things to make you feel seen. And so if you're going to fall apart when you don't have that manager, you're in trouble. I highly recommend people go and talk to a Shelly Lefko, talk to a Sondra Norris, get you somebody that can pick these things out of your brain so you can show up just to do your job. All right. In the interest of time, I could go down that road forever. Let's talk more about leadership real quick. One more question. You've coached hundreds, if not thousands of leaders. What is the most uncomfortable truth about leadership that nobody wants to talk about?
From the leader's perspective or from the general perspective?
From the leader's perspective.
The most uncomfortable truth about leadership that nobody wants to talk about is that even though you have the title of leader, it doesn't mean anything, and you have to earn the right to be a leader. That true leadership, it shows up in the way you do everything, because the DNA of a person who is a leader, so lowercase l, not uppercase L, is that you look at your life and you demand and are uncompromising in creating it the way you want to create it. And you believe that you can create it the way you want to create it. And you know that you can't do it by yourself. And I think when I've talked with leaders and I've said that to them, it's been an undoing of sorts for many, many people, because they say, wait, I don't believe that. I don't feel that way. How did I get here? And we kick off this whole thing of imposter syndrome and all of this stuff. But relating back to what you've just said, other people don't cause you to be diminished or to be marginalized. You cause yourself to feel diminished, to feel marginalized, to feel ignored, to feel whatever it is. And so when somebody like Shelly can help you unpack your belief, then you can sit with who you are authentically and say, That person's reaction and that person's action and that person's behavior is that person's.
Yeah.
That's not mine. It's uncomfortable. I don't like it, but it doesn't make me feel bad about myself. I'm not going to waste time getting angry about somebody else's emotional dysregulation, to use another, today's word. But I think that is that uncomfortable truth about humanity, but especially about leadership, that so many leaders assume, I have worked so hard climbing this mountain. I finally got this job. I expect people to do what I say because I said it, because I got here. And all of a sudden, the emperor has no clothes on. You're the same as all the rest of us.
Yeah. We are at time, but I think you have a little more time. There's way too much. So if you're okay with it, we're going to go a little bit longer, because I think
I'm good.
So much that people are able to take from this. So if you're listening, we still have another 20 to so minutes. Keep listening. We're going to get some more out of her, because this is amazing. All right. Something practical. What is one thing that any professional, regardless of your career, your role, your experience level, what is one thing every people manager, people leader that can do tomorrow to improve team performance, regardless of where they are?
A manager or a leader tomorrow, to improve their team's performance, could do one of two things or both things, whatever they want to do. And one of them takes a lot of courage to do. The other one's a little easier, but it still takes the willingness to put the time into doing it. So the first thing is, and this is the easy one, the first thing is, hey, just want to level set on where we are, where we've gone, what the most important things are, in case people have kind of lost the thread, and help give people the context of why we are where we are and what they can expect for the next 30 days and what the most important things are. What you do when you do that is you put a little stake in the ground. And you can say, oh, we already know all that, or we already do that, or they should already understand that. This puts the stake in the ground and gives you the opportunity to then deliver on that, repeat that, so that you can start positively affecting trust. The second thing that you could do that's a little bit harder is you could look inside yourself, look at your team, look at the past year, and as a manager or a leader, you screwed some stuff up, because we all screw stuff up. And when we screw stuff up, we break a little bit of trust. And so you could say to your team tomorrow, you know what, this thing that happened, it's been bugging me. I feel bad about it. I'm sure that it broke some trust between us, and I may or may not have the right to ask for your trust, depending on who you are sitting around this table right now. I'm going to ask for a little bit at a time by making this one promise. Make one promise of one thing that you will do in the next 30 days that is significant to your team, whatever it is. You've missed every single one-on-one. You're going to make sure you have one-on-ones in the next 30 days. You promised that you were going to, I don't know what, have a in-person lunch together. You're going to go and do that. Whatever it is, something that you can for sure deliver on, and then deliver on it. And once you deliver on it, say, 30 days ago, I made this promise to you expressly because I know I need to ask for your trust little by little. And so I'm going to make you another promise in the next 30 days. And here's the thing that we're going to do in the next 30 days. So bring intentionality to how you're showing up as a human being and as a leader for that team.
And leave those little stakes, those little markers along that path as you go. So then you can look back and be like, actually, there's a bunch of repeated places where you actually met the mark.
And you have to tell people you did that, because people don't remember that. People, believe it or not, have other things going on in their life. And so feel free to remind them and repeat.
Something that I always felt uncomfortable about, and I'm still not good at, but I give that advice to other people. You do have to market yourself. You do have to toot your own horn. You do have to remind people of why you're here, who you are. You just have to. That's just part of the game, especially in corporate America.
Yeah. I'll give you one more. I'll give you one more that they could do. One more thing that a manager could do, and this also takes a bunch of courage, is talk to people, talk to your team about something that's important to you. We're at the end of the year, so it's kind of a good time to do this. As a lot of people self-reflect at the end of the year. But if you're watching this when it's not the end of the year or the beginning of the year, and you're watching in the middle of next year, anytime is a good time to do this, is to tell your team some formative story about yourself. So your team talks about you no matter what they talk about you. They call you the whatever names they call you based on the characteristics that you show. If you have super high attention to detail, they probably have a certain name for you. If you're never there at meetings, they have a certain kind of a name for you. They're never going to tell you what they say about you, but they're always talking about you. So give them a decoder ring to you. If you have high attention to detail and you suspect that people really, they're probably calling you a micromanager behind your back, explain to them why you have attention to detail as something that's important to you, and do it with anything other but a work story. When in your life did that become impressed upon you that attention to detail was important? Was it when you had a paper route when you were a kid? Was it when, I don't know what, you accidentally left a litter of kittens in the cooler and shut the lid? Whatever it was, what is the personal story that led to this being so important to you? Once people understand you better, once you are vulnerable with other people, they will be more willing to be vulnerable with you.
I love that. Managers, I hope you're listening. And people that want to be people leaders, I hope you're listening. That's huge. And all of this comes down to I hate the term, but human resources. It's the human in human resources. It's the people in the people team. And even if you're not on the people team, if you're a leader, you have to have that element of humanity at every single place that you start.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on to our next segment.
Yep.
This is called game day rituals.
Okay.
So I'm trying to pick apart from everybody's brain. The reason why I have this one, this is selfish. I take multivitamins. I take Shilajit. I take matcha. I have
I want to talk to you about the Shilajit stuff. Okay.
I have 1,000 different supplements that I take. I meditate. This is the Plod Note Pen AI bands that summarizes my conversations. I have Otter for AI. I do all kinds of things. I try every type of productivity hack I possibly can to see if I can be better and be better at my job. So that's what I really want to get from this segment here. As somebody that guides others, what do you follow? What practices do you do to maintain your own edge? What's non-negotiable in your routine?
The morning routine is exactly the same every single day. Whatever it is. Mine is I get up, I go pee, I weigh myself and I write it down. I have a cup of salt water. I have a cup of coffee. I sit down for 26 minutes and I have self-indulgent 26-minute time. I usually play Candy
This is
Crush.
actual 26.
This is my actual routine. Yep. 26 minutes. I sit down and I play Candy Crush. And this is what I do. Yeah.
Can I ask, is there intention by 26?
Just to make it something specific and weird and I don't know. No, doesn't have to be. Can be whatever you want. I have
26 tattooed on my finger. This is from my last marriage, but it was the number, and it signifies fullness. And so I don't let it go because it signified my family and not necessarily my ex-wife. But that's why I was wondering. 26 has a lot of biblical, spiritual, practical meanings. But so I love 26. Anyway, keep going. Sorry.
Who knew? 26. Then I empty the dishes, do the dishes, and I fold the laundry because there's always something in there. And then I wash face, brush teeth, and then I take the dog for a walk, 2 to 3 miles every single day. During that time, for me personally, what I'm trying to do, I do whatever kind of personal development I need to do. Right now, my personal development is to envision my future self and to start programming my brain to start working on how do I get to my future self. So I don't think about, I try not to cycle on all the problems that might be going on of the current day. When you're walking, sometimes you can fall into like, my life sucks. This is terrible. And instead I force myself intentionally, future me, how do I get there? Brain, start chewing on that problem. Stop chewing on other things that aren't going to help. So I have that every single day. So morning routine, super important. The other thing that works for me, I also used to be let's try this, let's try that for productivity. And I admitted to myself, this is what works. Paper, pen, write it down. It's easy. I'm not relying on a Wi-Fi signal, nor do I have to like zoom in on my phone or whatever it is. Paper and pencil works for me, and time blocking. So it's the whole Pomodoro method, right? Like 25 minutes of extreme focus, take a break, 25 minutes, take a break. And also just committing the time in prioritized ways. So whatever is most important, block the time, hold it sacred, commit to it. Now, people will get used to that at work, but they need to know what it is. So I would go on vacation, but I would still be available. And I had a team that said, please stop doing that. Either be here or don't be here. But we don't know when to call you. We don't know when not to call you. It's not the cool thing that you think it is. And so people will get to know what your habits are, but you have to say what your habits are and then demonstrate what your habits are and try not to violate what your habits are. If you violate them, do it with an explanation.
Yes. Time boxing. My wife, we have a calendar, which is, of course, next to our TV of our daily chores. Then our fridge, we have, here's what my segments are. And then on my actual calendar that I share with my wife and even my work calendar, I time box driving to work, priority 1, priority 2. I make sure, and I build it out for at least a week. I try to do longer than that, but that everything blows up. But time boxing, I think, has been one of the biggest kind of accelerators of me being productive, I think. So that's huge. So if you're listening, need a way, time boxing for sure. Okay. This is maybe a 2-part question. It might be the same answer. If I'm a manager and I'm an individual contributor, I get past my morning routine, I get to work. What should be the first thing I'm doing once I get to work? Before your meetings and all that, like, is it check email? Is it say hi and build relationships? Like, how should I think about the first thing that I do when I get to work every single day?
Okay. If you work in one of those annoying open office environments and you walk in the door and therefore people see you, you need to say hi. Here's the problem with open environments. The person who is sitting there, the poor people who sit on the aisles, like, it creates this weird unconscious social dynamic that if you walk by somebody and you don't say hi, you've ignored them. It's a risk that you're taking. And especially if you are a person of position or authority, and those poor people in the aisles, they have to deal with people saying hi to them so many times because it's socially uncomfortable to not say hi to them. So not a fan of open work environments. But if you are, then you need to say hi to people. And, I don't know if there is a first thing that you need to do every single day. If you haven't already looked at your day to say, here's how my day is going to be, then obviously do that. I would say look in whatever your mode of communication is for anything that is urgent or crazy that has come up that's going to possibly wonk your day out. And by the way, when you're time blocking, 80% capacity. 80% capacity, because meetings will run over, shit will take longer, you'll clog the toilet, whatever is going to happen to make your day go sideways, your day is going to go sideways.
Yeah.
I think it's figure out what works for you and make sure that you do it first every time. Like if your team is struggling, it's visit your team. Go talk to them. See what's come up overnight. See what issues are hot today. I think it just depends on where you're at.
Consistency is coming back as a theme of our conversation today. All right. Yep. Next segment.
Yep.
Level up advice or giving more advice. This whole thing's been about advice. So it's not really another segment. Yeah. But what advice would you personally give to someone who feels stuck in their career, but they don't really know how to move forward or what to do?
Take a step back. Give yourself some grace for any self-flagellation feelings that you might be having because you're there. Forgive anybody that you might be trying to blame for where you're at. So clear out all your emotional baggage. Go for a run, do whatever you do in order to clear out your emotional baggage. Write it in a journal, write it on a piece of paper and crumple it, whatever it is. And then take a step back and be an observer and say, what have I learned in this job? What did I come into this job to learn? Why do I think it's a stinker of a job, but why is it also a good job? And you didn't necessarily say, I think it's a good or a bad job, but take that step back to say, where was I going in the beginning? Why did I take this? And what am I trying to do? So what kind of impact am I trying to have? What kind of skills do I like to have? What have I learned so far about what I thought I would like versus what it turns out I like? And that's all kind of looking at it through a different lens than maybe you're used to looking. And then I would go and do some informational interviews and go talk to people. If you're thinking, I'm stuck, I don't know what's next, make a list of 10 possibilities that you think might be next. Go on LinkedIn and say, hey, are you open to having a conversation about what your day looks like every day and what it took for you to get there? People are open to conversations. They like
really
connecting.
Want to have
they
conversations.
Like helping people. Yes. Especially when it's someone who says, hey, I feel stuck in my job. I'm looking for some advice. you've had this job at this company that I'm thinking might be the right direction. Can I talk to you? They're totally up to it. People are, lonely. Unfortunately, there is a loneliness epidemic going on in the world. So
Take just the first.
those would be the first. Those would be the first steps, I think. And I think when you use that word stuck, right? Like that's a particular emotional state. You can really start to get down on yourself, and you can really start to look outside of yourself for causes. And so I think doing this brings the power back into you and starts to give you hope. And I think you would hear from people like, oh, I was stuck too. Here's what I did. Here's what helped, So at least in your current position, you don't let that stuck feeling erode your own performance in your current job.
On that same track, I think a lot of us, we're listening to this podcast, we're doing the podcast because we want to develop. What do you say the best investment someone can make in their career right now? What else can they do?
An individual person, just to how do I invest in my career? I think there's probably a couple of things. One of them is if you don't already have one, but find the confidant, the person that you can talk to and really be you, not the person who will just agree with everything with you, but the person who will hold up a mirror and who will say, well, here's what I see, and here's why I would value you, and here's what I see in you, and be open to hearing what they have to say, both positive and negative, right? I think we oftentimes, we misassess or we underassess our own strengths and how we show up to people. So I think find that person who can gut check you, reality check you, whatever it is that you want to think of that as. I think depending on where you are, right? So like if you're feeling dissatisfied about where you are, or that you're not as far along as you wanted to be, or you're feeling lost or disillusioned, or what's next, or am I doing the right thing? I think I'm sure there's books you could read. I got to look up at my bookshelf. I don't know if I have anything right off the top of my head, but I don't. There's tools that are out there. There's ways for you to start thinking. I mean, even like, what color is my parachute? It's a really ancient book, right? But it really just gets you thinking differently and gets you out of your emotions about it. And then I would say sit down and just do an assessment, right? Like if you're not upset, and you're not, every 6 months to every year, you should be thinking about, what have I done? Why did I get here? How has this shifted? I think we have a great tendency in life in general. Oh, I'll just make a 1 degree shift. That's okay. I'm not going to die on that hill. But a few years go by and all of a sudden you're 35 degrees off the path that you thought you were on. Is that okay? Yeah. Did you mean to get there? And so I think just sitting down and having a talk with yourself from soup to nuts, is this job taking the time I thought it would, the effort I thought it would? Is it getting me the learning that I needed it to get? What's the trade-off I'm willing to make between I have the safety of salary and benefits and a pretty weird job market? Am I willing to stick it out? How can I make it still be the best opportunity for me here? I think we should all do that periodically. Also, write your resume, not because you're looking for a job, but really look at, what have I accomplished in whatever last period of time since the last time you did it? Because the last thing you want is to be in a position where you're like, oh God, I got to write my resume. And you have nothing.
It's the worst. So it's taking that mental checklist or actual checklist of where you've been and being honest with yourself. And then I think the first thing you said, which is very important, having somebody that's kind of a mentor, but having somebody that's going to be real with you about where you are in that analysis of your career so far, and being completely real with you. Having that person is huge. A lot of times they'll be your cheerleader, but a lot of times it's like, no, Brian, my old head of people, I had a situation and I told him about it. He was like, nope, you screwed up.
Yeah.
You screwed up. And it was like, thank you. And because that also then changed the way I was thinking about how I move forward. So that's huge to have that person.
Absolutely.
All right, second to last segment.
Yeah.
This one's a little bit deeper here. This is a newer segment I'm trying. It's called game film. And so we're going to analyze the game film. We're going to analyze something that happened in a real company. And we're going to walk through how you would do it. So think about the telestrator and freeze it right there. And then have the arrows, and John Madden tells you the wide receiver went left when he should have zagged, or whatever. Okay, let's talk about Microsoft. They try to do a culture transformation under Steve Ballmer, who is now the eccentric leader and owner of the Los Angeles Clippers. And so despite, of course, Microsoft having all the money in the world, being the tech giant, the leader, they struggle with the toxic competitive culture. And it actually slowed and hindered innovation, collaboration, and moving. They moved to a stack ranking system, and it forced managers to rate some of their employees as underperforming, even though they might have actually been performing based on how they set up their performance management system. So it created internal competition instead of cooperation. One of the things that's happening now across all these places that all the different companies, especially in Silicon Valley, is the buzzword now is transformation. And so when Microsoft, even 15 years ago, 20 years ago, when this happened, they were trying to do a cultural transformation. What do you think the fundamental mistake in how they approached this culture transformation? And the point of this question is, when other people, if you're watching or listening to this, and you're also trying to be a part of transformation yourself, what is a fundamental mistake you are going to make if you're trying to do something that's culturally transformative or performance-wise transformative?
Rely on employee engagement survey data. Look, a culture, so Microsoft, right? They were founded in 1975. Ballmer came on board in 2000 on the heels of a gigantic antitrust, anti-corruption, anti-monopoly lawsuit from the US government against this company. They were in an industry that was shifting away from something that they had dominated, right? So it was going to all of a sudden be mobile phones, physical products, the internet was coming online and all of that stuff. They needed innovation. They needed people to stay because they had institutional knowledge. They needed to bring new people in who brought in this new knowledge and be able to fold them into the organization. And when you look at what's the writing about it, what's the summarized writing about it, it's that the company started to focus too much on revenue. Right? Ballmer was 100% focused on revenue, as he needed to be, because they were starting to get into this very scary state as an organization. 40,000 people worked at this company in 2000. And if you look at an organizational life cycle, right, and you say, okay, here we are at the very, very beginning, two people sitting in their garage. What are all the stages that we go through till we get to the peak where things are going well? And to stay at the peak requires effort. You don't just stay there for no reason. And then you start going down the other side, which is just slow death, right? Bureaucracy down to, whatever the other stages are called. I can't recall all of them at this moment. But in order to get people to give you their creativity, their innovation, their resilience, their persistence, their willingness to try new things, every human being already has those things. Like, do you just say, oh, I'm going to give up on my kid? No, you don't say that. Do you have a hobby on the side that you save all your money for and you make sure you have all your vacation time for? Yes, you do. Do you find creative, innovative ways to go and engage in those things that you want to go engage in? Yes, you do. So we all have those things. We just decide whether or not we want to give them to the organization or not. So when Microsoft or any company is saying, we want to go through a culture transformation, none of them really answer the question why adequately. What is it that we're trying to do? The second thing they don't do is they assume that if they stand up and they say in as threatening a way or as in hopeful a way, here's the new thing that we're going after, everybody get on board. And they either say, get on board, or, you're going down with the ship, or they say, get on board because it's the greatest thing since sliced bread. They're thinking that's motivating to people. But if people are sitting there, and look where Microsoft was sitting right then, they were already sitting in a screwed up place culturally, commitment-wise, trust-wise, and all of that stuff. They were sitting in a crappy place. And then you're going to ask people who already are not so happy that they're on this journey with you to go join more of a journey with you. Understand that you don't have the people's commitment now. You're certainly not going to have it to protect this new business thing that you need to go do. You're humongous, so you have a lot of financial protection, and you're not going to be able to really feel all those little things that happen along the way. But when we talk about the topic of stack ranking in particular, look, there's leaders that believe and coaches that believe that's the way to go. That's what motivates people to try their hardest, is that they're going to win at the expense of other people. What they fail to understand is that employees are all in a group together. And many companies, after they do a layoff, and leading up to the layoff, there were offsites. There was swag given to people. There was whatever other little bits of money got spent. After that layoff, people will say, I wish that you did not buy us sweatshirts and all these other things to help us make us feel better. I wish you had asked us because I would have taken a 5% salary cut so that I could have kept this person next to me. That group of people, they're a tribe. They're protecting themselves first.
Yeah.
Very, very first. Even if I don't like you, if I'm on a team with you and I don't like you, if management comes down and does something, we're on the same team. We are on the same team as long as we're fighting management. So while there is a percentage of the population that is fired up by winning and having a colleague lose, that's a very small portion of the population. You have to play the odds. And the odds are that they're going to protect each other. So when you do stack ranking, it's like Hunger Games. You're screwing with people's heads.
Yeah.
Nobody likes survivor guilt.
And it's easy being an armchair quarterback and looking back and analyzing, saying where they went wrong. But I imagine that other leaders in the company, and their learning lesson for each of us, it goes back to what we keep talking about, is understanding the why. Understanding the why are we making this change? Why are people showing up to do this job? Why are people committed? And if they had to spend a little bit more time with the why are we doing this stack rank system and understood, will this actually work? Why or why not? I think they might have been able to avoid this.
Well, and I'm sure, in that discussion, I'm sure there were people who were sitting in the room saying, oh my God, do not stack rank. Are you kidding me? But in that room, for whatever reason, they couldn't say that. They couldn't play that out. Somebody decided it. It got decided. And as people, there's this whole groupthink thing that's like, well, I got to protect my own ass, so I guess I'll go along with it.
Yeah, I've gotten stuck in that one too. You got to protect yourself, but there is a way to politely dissent, make sure that it's shown, and then move on and play your role. You can't die on that hill, of course. You got to have a job. All right, we have gone way over.
Way over.
But this has been so helpful and impactful. I'm really excited that people get to listen. All right, let's close this out. This is called the 2-minute drill. I'm going to give you some quick questions. You're going to give me quick answers, and we'll close this thing out. Question 1, what's one skill that's absolutely critical for career success in today's world?
Presentation skills. Not for the reason you think on the face of it, but presentation skills.
You told me that 15 years ago, and because I hated to do them, and I realized that you were right. And I still to this day been working on making sure that my presentation skills are a lot better.
It helps everything. It helps the way you think.
Yep. You told me this, and you were right. Yep. What book has most influenced your approach to developing leaders and teams?
There's 2 books. One is called Influencer, and the other is called Scaling Up, and you have my copy of that.
Sure do. And I actually, I just took them off. Just to say, I actually have it right here because there's some books that I'm like, I do either to show off that I read books or to actually pull something from it. So Scaling Up, and the other was Influencer?
Yeah.
Okay. What's your go-to advice for somebody having a tough day or a tough week at work?
Go to that coach or your confidant, talk to them. Don't let it be the person who just keeps you in the dirt, right? Like, it's like cocaine, you just do more dirt and you just get more dirt and everything's worse and everything's terrible. So get somebody who is going to hold the mirror up and who is going to say, that sounds shitty. How are you going to change it? Like, let's get it better. And I think, take a break. The company is still going to be there. The problems are also going to be there. Turn inward, meditate, do whatever the thing is that lets you take a break from that and get perspective. The reason we have those tough days is we lose perspective.
Okay. Last question. It's kind of a big one though. What's something about building great teams that would surprise most people?
I mean, look, I think that it's what we've already talked about, right? Yes, you have to have a common business goal, but that is not going to get you there. When you look at whoever, Lencioni's thing is, coming from, and most of them are coming from, here's the problems or here's what not to do. They're not really good at what to do. So I think when building great teams, it's remember that it's about the people. When people think of, I knew I was on a great team, but I don't know how it happened. It's because there was this thing of chemistry. It was because people got to spend time together. People got to understand and know each other, know that we have much more in common than we ever have that will set us apart. But you have to get to that stuff. You have to talk about that stuff. And all the other things matter that are, normal things that people think about. Managers and structure and all that stuff.
All the fun, boring stuff. Okay. Actually, one last thing. You're a consultant. What are you working on? Do you have a shameless plug that you would like to put out into the universe for people?
I do. So I'm just launching. I've spent so much of my career in management and leadership, and back in, I don't know, 2010 or something like this. And then I kind of did iterations of it. I'm launching a community called the Career Navigation Mastery Studio. And so this is going to be for individual people to come and learn the tools, the mindset, and to have like-minded people to talk about, hey, I have to go have this conversation with my manager. I had this conversation with my manager, and here's what happened. What do I do? So I'm launching that at the actual, in a couple of weeks. I'll start having live events, and then the community opens in January.
So this is how to be better at your job, but practically application-wise, real advice, continued guidance on how to be better at your job. That you're having a course. This is like college course, how to be better, essentially structured.
It's actually a year-long community to get you to have your best year ever. People can roll in and out whenever they happen to stumble across it, but there will be monthly themes, weekly curriculum. There will be things like, hey, what do you need to know about benefits? There will be things like, hey, if you're in sales, here's an awesome sales leader who's going to tell you what does it take for you to be great in sales. And it's a lot about a lot of the stuff that we talked about today. So yes, it's about career success, but it's also just about life success, because this all applies to the same things. But it really is, yes, to your point, it's actionable strategies. And it's where these strategies kind of meet your accountability and your authenticity so that you can live without a mask as much as possible, feel confident going into a job or in your current job, knowing, what am I getting out of this? And then you get to carry that on for the rest of your life.
I'm being serious. I'm signing up. So you're just put me in the queue right now. You already know this.
Okay.
But if I'm somebody else listening, how do I sign up? What do I do?
Right now, because it's not all technologically put together, you email me at sondra@careernavmasterystudio.com.
I'll put it in a description. So if you're listening, it'll be in the description as well. One more time, Sondra@careernavmastery
Studio.
Okay.
It's long. But what I love
Sondra,
about
this
it
is amazing.
It's a bunch of strangers who get to talk about it. You're not like with people in your company and putting yourself at risk. So yeah. Thank you. I love it.
I've been looking for something like this. This is going to make people better in their careers. Sondra, this has been amazing. This is the reason why in every one of my episodes, I say there's that one person that has been the most impactful in my career. It's been you. I am probably going to release this podcast on Wednesday, even though I have 2 other episodes I was supposed to release, but I am so excited about this one. I'm probably going to skip a couple people. So Jason, I am sorry. And Bo, I am sorry. This has been amazing.
Thank you, Brian.
I will also put Sondra's information into the description. This is Sondra Norris. If you're looking for her, she's amazing. She can help you out, help your companies out. Thank you, Sondra. This has been extremely helpful, and I'm glad and thankful that we're able to go over a little bit, but it's all been helpful. So,
grand pleasure as always.
My name is Brian Bell. This has been the Level Up Career Playbook Podcast, otherwise known as How to Be Better at Your Job. I am thankful and honored that you were all here listening and watching. Once again, Sondra, thank you, and I will see you all next time. Have a good one.
Peace.